Despite the Ordnance Board's profound reservations, the sheer desperation of Britain's situation in late 1940 forced their hand. Churchill himself, a staunch supporter of MD1 and its unconventional methods, applied pressure. The sticky bomb, officially designated the No. 74 Grenade, was reluctantly approved for mass production. This decision, however, simply shifted the problem from the drawing board to the factory floor, creating a manufacturing nightmare that highlighted the weapon's inherent instability. The core explosive compound was a volatile gel based on nitroglycerin, chosen for its high brisance, shattering power relative to its weight. Nitroglycerin, however, is notoriously sensitive to shock and friction. Manufacturing it safely required specialized facilities and highly trained personnel. Filling fragile glass spheres with this temperamental jelly was an exercise fraught with peril. Factories assigned the task, often small chemical works repurposed for the war effort, reported numerous accidents. Minor spills could lead to unexpected detonations. Dropped flasks could potentially level a workshop. The glass spheres themselves, needing to be thin enough to shatter reliably on impact, were prone to cracking during handling or transport. Each sticky bomb produced was, in essence, a small, unpredictable disaster waiting to happen. The adhesive coating presented its own unique set of problems. The specification called for an adhesive so powerful it would stick instantly and firmly to a vertical steel plate, even one coated in dust or thin mud. Finding such a compound and figuring out how to apply it evenly to a glass sphere without accidentally gluing the entire production line together was a significant challenge. The final adhesive chosen was incredibly effective but also incredibly messy and hazardous. Workers applying the sticky coating had to wear specialized protective gear, and spills were notoriously difficult to clean. Stories emerged of workers becoming permanently bonded to equipment or even each other. The protective outer casing, the two thin metal hemispheres designed to keep the soldier from sticking to the bomb before use, was another source of trouble. The mechanism relied on a simple spring and pin. Pull the pin, and the hemispheres were supposed to spring apart cleanly, exposing the sticky surface. However, manufacturing tolerances, corrosion from damp British weather, or simple battlefield dirt could cause the mechanism to jam. A soldier pulling the pin might find the casing stuck fast, leaving him holding an armed grenade he couldn't use and couldn't safely discard. Conversely, a damaged or weakened casing might spring open prematurely, gluing the bomb to the soldier's hand or uniform just as he was preparing to throw it, a terrifying prospect given the 5-second fuse. Transporting the finished bombs was equally problematic. Packed carefully in specialized containers, they still represented a significant hazard. Rough handling, vehicle accidents, or even nearby explosions could potentially trigger the sensitive nitroglycerin or damage the delicate glass flasks. Units receiving shipments of sticky bombs often treated them with the ginger respect usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. Training troops to use this monstrosity was perhaps the greatest challenge. Instructors had to teach soldiers how to handle a weapon that seemed deliberately designed to kill them. The procedure was drilled relentlessly. Approach the tank, preferably from the side or rear, ideally under cover. Pull the safety pin only when ready to throw. Slap the bomb firmly onto the armor. Not too hard to break the glass prematurely, not too gently to fail to adhere. Release the handle, which contained the fuse lighter. Run like hell. The 5-second fuse left absolutely no margin for error. Hesitation, fumbling the release, or slipping while running could be fatal. Early training exercises resulted in numerous injuries, mostly minor burns or bruises from premature detonations or mishandling, but occasionally more serious incidents. The psychological barrier was immense. Soldiers were understandably terrified of a weapon coated in superglue and filled with sweating explosive. Instructors struggled to build confidence in a device that seemed actively hostile to its user. Mock-ups filled with sand or flour were used extensively, but nothing could truly simulate the terror of handling the live version. The weapon quickly gained a grim reputation among the troops, often referred to by nickname. Despite the Ordnance Board's profound reservations, the sheer desperation of Britain's situation in late 1940 forced their hand. Churchill himself, a staunch supporter of MD1 and its unconventional methods, applied pressure. The sticky bomb, officially designated the No. 74 Grenade, was reluctantly approved for mass production. This decision, however, simply shifted the problem from the drawing board to the factory floor, creating a manufacturing nightmare that highlighted the weapon's inherent instability. The core explosive compound was a volatile gel based on nitroglycerin, chosen for its high brisance, shattering power relative to its weight. Nitroglycerin, however, is notoriously sensitive to shock and friction. Manufacturing it safely required specialized facilities and highly trained personnel. Filling fragile glass spheres with this temperamental jelly was an exercise fraught with peril. Factories assigned the task, often small chemical works repurposed for the war effort, reported numerous accidents. Minor spills could lead to unexpected detonations. Dropped flasks could potentially level a workshop. The glass spheres themselves, needing to be thin enough to shatter reliably on impact, were prone to cracking during handling or transport. Each sticky bomb produced was, in essence, a small, unpredictable disaster waiting to happen. The adhesive coating presented its own unique set of problems. The specification called for an adhesive so powerful it would stick instantly and firmly to a vertical steel plate, even one coated in dust or thin mud. Finding such a compound and figuring out how to apply it evenly to a glass sphere without accidentally gluing the entire production line together was a significant challenge. The final adhesive chosen was incredibly effective but also incredibly messy and hazardous. Workers applying the sticky coating had to wear specialized protective gear, and spills were notoriously difficult to clean. Stories emerged of workers becoming permanently bonded to equipment or even each other. The protective outer casing, the two thin metal hemispheres designed to keep the soldier from sticking to the bomb before use, was another source of trouble. The mechanism relied on a simple spring and pin. Pull the pin, and the hemispheres were supposed to spring apart cleanly, exposing the sticky surface. However, manufacturing tolerances, corrosion from damp British weather, or simple battlefield dirt could cause the mechanism to jam. A soldier pulling the pin might find the casing stuck fast, leaving him holding an armed grenade he couldn't use and couldn't safely discard. Conversely, a damaged or weakened casing might spring open prematurely, gluing the bomb to the soldier's hand or uniform just as he was preparing to throw it, a terrifying prospect given the 5-second fuse. Transporting the finished bombs was equally problematic. Packed carefully in specialized containers, they still represented a significant hazard. Rough handling, vehicle accidents, or even nearby explosions could potentially trigger the sensitive nitroglycerin or damage the delicate glass flasks. Units receiving shipments of sticky bombs often treated them with the ginger respect usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. Training troops to use this monstrosity was perhaps the greatest challenge. Instructors had to teach soldiers how to handle a weapon that seemed deliberately designed to kill them. The procedure was drilled relentlessly. Approach the tank, preferably from the side or rear, ideally under cover. Pull the safety pin only when ready to throw. Slap the bomb firmly onto the armor. Not too hard to break the glass prematurely, not too gently to fail to adhere. Release the handle, which contained the fuse lighter. Run like hell. The 5-second fuse left absolutely no margin for error. Hesitation, fumbling the release, or slipping while running could be fatal. Early training exercises resulted in numerous injuries, mostly minor burns or bruises from premature detonations or mishandling, but occasionally more serious incidents. The psychological barrier was immense. Soldiers were understandably terrified of a weapon coated in superglue and filled with sweating explosive. Instructors struggled to build confidence in a device that seemed actively hostile to its user. Mock-ups filled with sand or flour were used extensively, but nothing could truly simulate the terror of handling the live version. The weapon quickly gained a grim reputation among the troops, often referred to by nicknames far less polite than Sticky Bomb. Yet, despite the fear and the obvious flaws, hundreds of thousands were produced. Britain needed an anti-tank weapon, and this dangerous, flawed, jam-jar bomb was, for a terrifying period, the best they could mass-produce. By late 1941 and into 1942, the number 74 Sticky Bomb began arriving in significant quantities, issued primarily to the British Home Guard units preparing for the dreaded German invasion, but also finding its way to regular army units deploying overseas, particularly to the North African theater. Its arrival was met not with enthusiasm, but with a mixture of morbid curiosity and outright dread. The weapon's dangerous reputation preceded it, fueled by training accidents and a sheer visceral terror of its design. Soldiers quickly understood that using the Sticky Bomb was not a standard tactical procedure. It was an act of near-suicidal desperation, reserved for moments when all other options had failed. The official doctrine envisioned soldiers bravely dashing forward under fire, slapping the bomb onto the flank of an advancing panzer, and retreating to safety. The reality of combat proved far more brutal and chaotic. Approaching a moving tank, often supported by infantry and machine guns, close enough to physically attach a grenade required extraordinary courage or sheer recklessness. The 5-second fuse offered no time for careful placement or a measured retreat. It was a mad, adrenaline-fueled dash, a slap, and a desperate scramble for cover, often under direct enemy fire. Early combat reports from North Africa painted a grim picture. While there were isolated accounts of successful attacks, particularly against stationary or lightly armored vehicles, failures were far more common. Soldiers reported struggling to get the bomb to adhere to dusty or muddy tank hulls. The powerful adhesive was less effective on dirty surfaces. Others described the horror of the outer casing jamming, leaving them holding a live grenade they couldn't throw or attach. Perhaps most terrifying were incidents where soldiers successfully attached the bomb, but were gunned down by the tank's machine gun or supporting infantry before they could reach cover. Their sacrifice rendered tragically futile. The psychological burden on the troops tasked with carrying this weapon was immense. Unlike a rifle or a conventional grenade, the Sticky Bomb felt inherently treacherous. Every step taken with it strapped to their webbing was a gamble against its unstable nitroglycerin heart. The act of pulling the pin and exposing the sticky surface transformed the user into a hazard not just to the enemy, but potentially to himself and his comrades. This constant, low-level fear eroded morale and made soldiers understandably reluctant to employ the weapon unless absolutely necessary. Furthermore, its effectiveness against the increasingly heavy armor appearing on the battlefield was questionable. While the nitroglycerin charge was powerful enough to potentially damage tracks, suspension, or perhaps breach the thinner side or rear armor of early war panzers, it was unlikely to achieve a catastrophic kill against the frontal armor of later models like the Panzer IV Ausf. F2 or the Formidable Tiger, which began appearing in North Africa in late 1942. The Sticky Bomb was, at best, a mobility kill weapon capable of disabling a tank rather than destroying it outright. Despite these significant drawbacks, production continued, driven by the stark lack of alternatives. For infantry units lacking dedicated anti-tank guns or bazookas, which were only just beginning to arrive from the U.S., the Sticky Bomb represented their only means of fighting back against armor, however flawed and dangerous. It became the weapon of the ambush, the close-quarters street fight, the desperate last stand. Soldiers learned through bitter experience that its best use was against engine decks, tracks, or vision ports. Vulnerable points where even a relatively small explosion could cripple the machine or force the crew to bail out. The weapon's very existence was a stark reflection of Britain's vulnerability in the early war years. It was a crude, dangerous, and often ineffective tool, born of desperation and rushed into service before adequate testing or refinement. Its presence in the arsenal highlighted the yawning gap between the industrial reality of Britain's strained production capacity and the urgent need for weapons capable of defeating Hitler's panzers. While engineers worked frantically on better solutions like the PIT anti-tank projector, the ordinary soldier was left to confront tons of rolling steel armed with little more than a sticky glass jar filled with volatile explosive, a weapon that demanded more courage from its user than effectiveness against its target. Despite its terrifying reputation and questionable effectiveness, the sticky bomb did achieve moments of desperate success, often in situations where conventional anti-tank weapons were unavailable or had failed. These isolated victories, while rare, became legendary among the troops, reinforcing the weapon's status as a tool of last-ditch heroism, demanding more raw courage than technical skill. The calculus of using the number 74 grenade was brutally simple. The potential reward, disabling an enemy tank, had to outweigh the extremely high personal risk. In a chaotic street fighting during the Allied landings in North Africa, Operation Torch, and later in Sicily and Italy, the sticky bomb found its niche. Urban environments offered the close quarters and abundant cover necessary for a soldier to potentially ambush a tank. Infantrymen learned to wait in bombed-out buildings or concealed alleyways, letting the panzers rumble past, then dashing out to slap the grenade onto the vulnerable engine deck or rear armor. Success often depended on the element of surprise and the German tank crew's situational awareness. A quick burst from the tank's coaxial machine gun could cut down the attacker before he even reached the hull. One semi-apocryphal story, repeated in various forms across different units, told of a British private in Sicily, armed only with sticky bombs, who single-handedly disabled 3 German Panzer IIIs that had broken through the Allied lines. Hiding in a shell crater, he allegedly waited until each tank was almost on top of him, dashed out, slapped the bomb onto its tracks or engine compartment, and dove back into cover just as the 5-second fuse expired. Whether entirely true or embellished by battlefield rumor, such tales captured the essence of the sticky bomb's use. Acts of extreme individual bravery against overwhelming odds. The weapon also saw service with Commonwealth forces, including Australians fighting in the Pacific Theater against Japanese tanks. While Japanese armor was generally lighter and less formidable than German panzers, the dense jungle environment often forced extremely close-range engagements where the sticky bomb could, in theory, be effective. However, the high humidity and frequent rain of the jungle environment exacerbated the grenade's reliability issues. Adhesive often failed on wet surfaces, and the sensitive fuse mechanism was prone to malfunction in the damp conditions. Perhaps the most poignant intended role for the sticky bomb was with the British Home Guard. In the dark days of 1940–41, when German invasion seemed imminent, these hastily assembled units of civilians were issued hundreds of thousands of number 74 grenades. Training manuals depicted scenarios where elderly men or teenage boys would ambush German tanks on quiet country lanes, disabling them with these crude devices. The reality, had the invasion occurred, would likely have been a slaughter. Pitting untrained civilians armed with unreliable, short-range contact grenades against battle-hardened panzer crews was a testament to Britain's desperation. Thankfully, Operation Sea Lion was never launched, and the Home Guard never had to test the sticky bomb's effectiveness in a real invasion scenario. By 1943, however, the tide began to turn, technologically speaking. The arrival of more effective infantry anti-tank weapons, particularly the British PIT, projector, infantry, anti-tank, and the American M1 bazooka, started to render the sticky bomb obsolete for regular Army units. These weapons offered significantly greater range, 50 to 100 yards versus point-blank, better armor penetration, using shaped charges, and, crucially, were far safer for the operator. Soldiers quickly gravitated towards these superior alternatives whenever they were available. Yet, the sticky bomb lingered in service, often issued to secondary units, resistance fighters, or kept in reserve for emergencies. Its simplicity and low cost meant it remained a viable option for situations where more complex weapons were unavailable or impractical. Resistance groups operating in occupied Europe sometimes favored it for sabotage operations against parked vehicles or infrastructure, where the need for adhesion outweighed the risk. The enduring image of the sticky bomb, however, remained one of almost suicidal bravery. It was a weapon that demanded the user close to within touching distance of a multi-ton war machine bristling with machine guns. It required perfect timing, nerves of steel, and a significant amount of luck. Its successes were measured not in statistics, but in individual acts of courage that often went unrecorded. While technically flawed and undeniably dangerous, the number 74 grenade represented the absolute will to resist, embodied in a simple, sticky, glass jar filled with high explosive, a terrifying solution born from a terrifying time. While British and Commonwealth soldiers grappled with the terrifying realities of the sticky bomb, German technical intelligence, upon capturing examples of the device, likely viewed it with a mixture of professional contempt and morbid fascination. German ordnance engineers, products of a system that prized sophisticated mechanics and calculated safety factors, would have seen the number 74 grenade as everything their design philosophy rejected: crude, dangerously unstable, reliant on unpredictable adhesion, and demanding suicidal proximity from its user. It was the antithesis of German engineering principles. Their own solutions to the infantry anti-tank problem were evolving along different, albeit equally brutal lines. The development of shape-charge technology led to the Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck, simple, recoilless launchers capable of firing powerful warheads that could penetrate Allied armor from a relatively safe distance of 30 to 60 meters. These weapons, while single-shot, Panzerfaust, were requiring a crew, Panzerschreck, represented a far more practical and less suicidal approach to arming the individual soldier against tanks. They were cheap, mass-produced, and offered a crucial standoff capability that the sticky bomb utterly lacked. The German engineers saw the sticky bomb not as a viable weapon, but as evidence of British desperation, a makeshift stopgap born from industrial weakness. And, in many ways, they were right. By mid-1943, the sticky bomb was rapidly becoming obsolete for frontline British Army units. Two new weapons dramatically changed the infantry anti-tank equation. The first was the PIT, Projector Infantry Anti-Tank. Though heavy, cumbersome, and possessing a brutal recoil that could break collarbones, the PIT used a powerful spigot mortar system to launch a shaped charge bomb capable of defeating the armor of most German tanks at ranges up to 100 yards. Crucially, it gave the soldier a fighting chance from outside direct machine gun range. The second, and arguably more influential, arrival was the American M1 bazooka. Lighter than the PIT, easier to use, and firing a rocket-propelled shaped charge with good accuracy out to 100 to 150 yards, the bazooka quickly became the preferred infantry anti-tank weapon for Allied forces. Its relative safety, range, and effectiveness made the prospect of running up to a tank with a sticky glass jar seem utterly insane by comparison. As bazookas and Piats flowed to the front lines in increasing numbers, the number 74 grenade was gradually withdrawn from standard infantry issue. Its production slowed and eventually ceased. The weapon that had been conceived as a desperate measure against invasion was now being superseded by genuinely effective, albeit still dangerous, anti-tank technology. Its brief, terrifying reign on the battlefield was coming to an end. However, the sticky bomb didn't disappear entirely. Its very simplicity and low cost meant it remained in reserve stockpiles and continued to be issued to units operating in specific niche roles. British commandos and special forces sometimes carried them for sabotage missions against parked vehicles or installations where silent, close-quarters attack was required. More significantly, vast quantities were supplied to resistance movements in occupied Europe. For partisans fighting a guerrilla war with limited resources, the sticky bomb, despite its flaws, offered means, however desperate, to strike back against German armor or disrupt supply lines. Its small size and simple mechanism made it relatively easy to conceal and use without extensive training, aligning perfectly with the hit-and-run tactics of underground fighters. Its persistence in these secondary roles highlights the weapon's true nature. It was never a masterpiece of engineering or a truly effective solution in the mold of the bazooka or Panzerfaust. It was a weapon of dire necessity, a physical manifestation of a nation pushed to the brink, forced to arm its defenders with tools that demanded almost unimaginable courage. The resources poured into developing complex anti-tank guns or sophisticated shaped charges stood in stark contrast to the cheap glass, volatile jelly, and industrial glue that comprised the sticky bomb. It represented the absolute minimum required to give a man any chance against a tank, a grim calculation made when Britain's survival hung precariously in the balance. Its eventual replacement by better weapons was not a sign of its failure, but a sign that the desperate hour had passed. By the time Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy in June 1944, the No. 74 sticky bomb was already largely a relic in the arsenals of frontline infantry units. The vast industrial power of the United States had flooded the European theater with the M1 bazooka, while British factories concentrated on producing the effective, if ungainly, PIT. These weapons, utilizing the decisive power of shaped charge warheads delivered from a relatively safe distance, had become the standard tools for infantry anti-tank defense. The prospect of asking a soldier to engage a Panther or Tiger tank at point-blank range with a glass grenade had shifted from a necessary evil to a tactical absurdity. Training manuals still included sections on the sticky bomb, often as a legacy requirement or for familiarization, but its practical application in major combat operations dwindled rapidly. Units equipped with bazookas or Piats simply had no reason to rely on the older, far more dangerous weapon. The sticky bomb was relegated to rear echelon troops, emergency stockpiles, or specialized units that might find a niche use for its adhesive properties in sabotage or demolition tasks unrelated to direct anti-tank combat. The soldiers themselves greeted its departure with profound relief. Veterans who had been forced to carry or train with the sticky bomb in the earlier, more desperate years of the war often spoke of it with a mixture of dark humor and genuine horror. It was universally regarded as one of the most terrifying pieces of equipment they had ever been issued. Unlike a faulty rifle or a jamming machine gun, the sticky bomb's failure mode wasn't simply ineffectiveness. It was potentially catastrophic self-destruction. The psychological relief of being issued a bazooka, a weapon that, while still dangerous, at least put distance between the operator and the target, was immense. This rapid obsolescence highlights the brutal efficiency of wartime technological development. The sticky bomb, conceived and rushed into production during Britain's darkest hour in 1940, served its grim purpose for a brief, critical window when literally nothing else was available in sufficient quantity. But as soon as more effective, safer, and mass-producible alternatives emerged, it was quickly and unceremoniously discarded by the forces facing the primary armored threat. Its success was measured not in the number of tanks it destroyed, which was likely very small, but in the fact that it existed during a period when Britain's anti-tank capability was otherwise non-existent. It was a stopgap, a band-aid applied to a gaping wound in the nation's defenses. Interestingly, while its use by regular Allied forces declined, the sticky bomb found a continued, albeit limited, life in the shadowy world of resistance warfare. Allied Special Operations units, like Britain's Special Operations Executive SOE, continued to supply batches of No. 74 grenades to partisan groups in occupied France, Norway, and elsewhere. For fighters operating with minimal equipment and training, the sticky bomb's simplicity and concealability offered some advantages. It required no complex launcher, could be hidden easily, and its devastating, if localized, explosive power was still useful for disabling parked vehicles, destroying infrastructure, or creating chaos during ambushes. In the context of guerrilla warfare, where suicidal attacks were sometimes a grim necessity, the sticky bomb retained a degree of relevance long after it had vanished from conventional battlefields. Reports from French Maquis units, for example, occasionally mention its use in attacks against German supply trucks or staff cars. However, even in this niche role, its reputation remained fearsome. Resistance fighters, like the soldiers before them, were acutely aware of the dangers involved. The sticky bomb was never a preferred weapon. It was a tool used when options were limited and risks were high. Its continued presence in the arsenals of irregular forces serves as a final, stark reminder of its fundamental nature. A weapon born not of sophisticated engineering, but of sheer unadulterated desperation, demanding more courage than skill from anyone forced to wield it. The number 74 sticky bomb grenade ultimately occupies a unique, almost mythological place in the history of World War II ordnance. It was not a war-winning weapon like the bazooka or the PIT. It did not represent a triumph of engineering like the proximity fuse or radar. Statistically, its impact on the battlefield was likely minimal, responsible for disabling only a small number of enemy vehicles, often at a terrible cost to its users. Yet, its story endures precisely because it embodies the sheer, desperate courage demanded by total war when conventional solutions fail. The weapon itself was a product of a specific, terrifying moment in history, Britain facing invasion with virtually empty hands. Its design philosophy was the absolute antithesis of sound engineering principles. It prioritized immediate, brute force effect over safety, reliability, and user-friendliness. It was conceived by Churchill's toy shop, a department deliberately created to bypass the caution and conservatism of the established Ordnance Board, reflecting a national willingness to embrace dangerous, unconventional measures when survival itself was at stake. The contrast with genuinely successful infantry anti-tank weapons is stark. The American bazooka and the British PIT utilized the sophisticated physics of the shaped charge, heat, allowing a relatively small projectile to achieve focused armor penetration from a distance. They represented a leap forward in understanding projectile dynamics. The sticky bomb, by comparison, was pure brute force, a clumsy attempt to simply blow a hole through steel using unstable high explosive delivered by hand. It was a 19th century solution desperately applied to a 20th century problem. Its rapid obsolescence on the main battlefields after 1943 confirms its status as a stopgap measure. Armies equipped with effective standoff weapons had no logical reason to ask their soldiers to perform the near-suicidal act of manually attaching a contact grenade to an enemy tank. The sticky bomb's brief operational window highlights the incredible speed of technological advancement during the war, where desperate improvisations were quickly replaced by more scientifically sound, mass-producible solutions. Yet, the very flaws that made the sticky bomb a tactical nightmare contribute to its enduring, grim fascination. It serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of technological inferiority. The courage required to wield such a weapon, to run toward a machine gun-sweeping panzer armed with little more than adhesive and nitroglycerin, is almost impossible to comprehend. The soldiers who used it, often knowing its unreliability and the slim odds of success, represent the absolute limit of infantry bravery. The final verdict on the sticky bomb is not about its technical merits, which were few, but about what it represented. It was a physical manifestation of a nation's defiance, a willingness to fight back with anything available, however crude or dangerous. It demonstrated that even in an age of increasingly industrialized warfare, the individual soldier's courage, pushed to its absolute extreme, could still play a role, however desperate. Ultimately, the story of the jam jar bomb teaches a sobering lesson. Necessity may be the mother of invention, but desperation often gives birth to monsters. The sticky bomb was one such monster, flawed, dangerous, and quickly forgotten once better tools arrived. But for a brief, critical period, it was the only tool available, a terrifying symbol of courage held together by little more than glass, glue, and the sheer will to resist.